greatness in a sea of the dying and shameless. So a sea of the aimless. I don't wanna be one of the nameless. I'm a raincoat with the plastic.
How's it going, meatheads? Back with you for another video to pump up your day with some motorcycle content. And today I got some spicy things that I want to say today, just because I have a recent video that I uploaded 2 weeks ago, as the time of this video comes out, that I was talking about taking my bike in for some maintenance. And I obviously kind of titled it where everything I touch breaks, right? And obviously I'm a Harley channel, so it kind of comes maybe synonymously that Harley Davidsons are unreliable, which is something that we definitely all hear at times, is how Harley Davidsons are unreliable motorcycles. So kind of brings in the topic of what I'm going to talk about, is that I want these myths about Harleys specifically to just die. I'm sick of hearing them. I'm sick of the same statements over and over by people that really just don't understand, that have never ridden a Harley, never ridden a modern Harley, or have any experience with a modern Harley Davidson motorcycle. And start off with what I said, Harley Davidsons are unreliable, right? Very, very synonymous that Harley Davidsons are unreliable. Oh, I see more Harleys on the side of the road than I do running. Oh, they're always running between the shop, the bars, and garages, right? Well, I got a big news check for you. Fact check. Independent fact checkers found this to be false. So, for reference, my bike, I bought it with 5,300 miles on it, right? I have 32,733 miles in under 3 years. I have put over 27,000 miles on this bike. And realistically, the only things that I have ever had fail being like, oh, this is a big maintenance item that needs to be taken care of now, has been my rectifier, which went out while I was riding at one point, my oil pressure switch, which I have documented here on the channel, and now recently the neck bearings on my bike. All in total is probably about $300 in parts that have unexpectedly failed, right? Like the only thing that I do most often with my bike that is maintenance and stuff that needs to be done is tires and oil changes, flushing the brake fluids, brake pads, that kind of stuff. Other than that, this bike has taken me across the state. It's done 2,000 mile weeks where I've just been riding it all the time and around. It's been a great bike, even after I've done the performance mod of putting on my cam and getting it dyno tuned, which, if you're aware of performance mods, if you're not careful, you can actually cause reliability issues, because it's like a law of diminishing returns. The more power I'm trying to make, the more issues I can have with reliability along the way in the future, because some parts just can't handle the power that you're trying to make. With that being said, I've not had anything like, oh, the bike left me stranded on the side of the road. Oh no, the bike, it just stopped running while I was riding. It just shut off for whatever reason. That's never happened. I've not blown off my belt. I've not popped a rear tire. I should say, mechanically speaking, mechanical reliability, this bike has been bulletproof, and I have not ever had to be oh, I don't know if this bike will get me across the state or not, and that's where I determine reliability. Do you worry that this machine that you're in is going to be able to do what you need it to do? Is it going to be able to take you on that long trip? Is it going to be able to get you from A to B every single day for this summer? And that's simply not my Harley. A lot of what Harley reliability comes down to is how old that Harley is and how well it's maintained. The older the Harley, the more likely is just a lot. There's more wear and tear on the motor. There's more wear and tear on all the moving components of it, that it can leave you stranded. And if somebody's especially not taking care of it, not keeping up on like the age of the bearings and the state of the whole bike itself, it's going to leave you stranded. And that applies to any motorcycle, whether it's a Harley, a Honda, a Yamaha, or whatnot. If it's not properly maintained, it will not take you where it needs to, or where you need it to take you. Let's get to myth number 2 on this list that needs to die. Harleys leak oil. They mark their territory. They do this, they do that. You know, if it's not leaking, it's not a Harley. You know, that 100% needs to die. Because if your modern day Harley is leaking oil, it means that you did something when you were installing a gasket, putting back your oil drain plug. You didn't put a new O-ring on it. You didn't check this, didn't check that. If that's the case, you have an oil leak. You got an oil leak because something's not right. Simple as that. For a while, that was a very true statement with Harleys. And I'm saying that because the older Harleys had to do it. They was designed to do that. They didn't have the gasket technology to create perfect seals. They had larger tolerances because they didn't properly cool themselves. So as the motors got hot, they needed to expand. You know, those kind of things were necessary. In today's modern Harley motors with the Revolution, well, obviously the Revolution Max is a liquid cooled, so if you really have oil leaking, you got a major problem. But like with the M8s, the twin cams, the Evo motor in the Sportster, and even older Evos, like if you had a leak, you had a problem. The twin cam, if you had a leak, you had a pretty decent problem to it. You know, my M8 has not dripped an ounce of oil unless I was fucking with something, in which case oil kind of just will seep by, or there's going to be residual oil on some sort of surface that once the bike does get hot, it finally has enough liquidity. It's not anti-viscosity, we'll just say, that it'll actually finally drip on the ground, right? But otherwise, there is not a single time that you should see on a modern Harley a significant amount of oil under it unless there's a problem. So let's kill that myth. Harley, how about this one? Let's talk about this one. This one's gonna get some people ruffled, and this is gonna get some people really hot and bothered. But Harley Davidsons are slow compared to your race replica sport bike that you shouldn't be racing unless you're on a track. Naughty. Slow is always a relative term. It's slow compared to what? Realistically, I've seen guys that lay 0 to 60 times on Harleys in under 4 seconds. You realize that that's as fast to 0 to 60 time as a Camaro SS, a Mustang GT, and those cars, in comparison to some, are slow, but in a comparison to the average car, the average sedan, that's a fast car. It's a sports car. It's a muscle car. You know, it's a performance machine. So what I'm trying to get to is that in the realm of motorcycles, they are slower compared to smaller displacement counterparts, yes. But some of those smaller displacement counterparts were meant to be fully appreciated on a track. And you, good sir, doing highway runs at 3 in the morning should not actually fully know what that's like legally. But I won't tell on you. The meathead is at least 2 brain cells smart enough to know that you never snitch on somebody. And there are plenty of Harleys out there that are fast, even stock. You know, the governor is set on these bikes at 110 miles an hour. And there are dudes that take their 114s with very little modification right up to 110 miles an hour. That That's 110 is plenty of fast for me. I've been up to 120 plus on this bike. You know, once you've hit the speed, hit the top of the speedo, you really can't tell how much faster you're going. But with that in mind, that's been plenty of fast for me. I don't need to go faster than that. So, you know, fast is always a relative thing. Are you talking about top speed? Yeah. These aren't racing down the track. If you're talking about 0 to 60 acceleration, actually this is pretty damn quick. And considering that, like, what goes in hand with that is Harley Davidsons are expensive for the power they make, right? Everybody looks at the 80 horsepower peak horsepower number, right? And that's how they determine how powerful it is. Anybody that looks at a dynograph will tell you that that's not accurate. Peak is one thing, but you got to look at the whole graph as to get a true idea of what kind of power a machine actually makes. You know, how big are your curves? How much area is underneath those curves? Because the area under the curve is actually the determination of how much power you have, right? Because that means that in all the rev ranges and whatever gear you're in, that's where you make power. That's where you have power. All the RPMs, all the throttle positions that you're in, all the area underneath that dynograph curve for the horsepower and torque is where you're making power. Now, personally speaking, Harley Davidson's 110 foot-pounds of torque on like a stock motor is pretty good. It's got plenty of oomph on it. My bike here makes 106 horsepower and 120 foot-pounds torque at the rear wheel, true measurement, real actual numbers, and man, it's plenty powerful for me. I can take off from a stoplight and just feel that my whole body wants to get pulled off the bike. And you take that into a smaller frame bike, like say a Softail, and then you make about the same amount of power or so. Man, it's got to be you got to feel like you're gotta have a good seat that has ample support. Otherwise, you'll go right off that back fender and get your ass eaten out by the rear tire. The peak horsepower numbers, yeah, are not as impressive as a super sport motorcycle's peak horsepower numbers, but they have to rev so high in RPM to actually make that power is the problem. You have to really work for it. You have to really pin it out, and you got to time your shifts right so that you don't fall out of the power band. And that's the real problem with super sports, is that they make a lot of power, but you have to be in the right power band. Whereas with this bike, I have power almost everywhere in the RPMs. You have to be at a specific RPM. You got to be giving it all you got with a sport bike in order to actually be in the power band and actually feel like you are powerful. But otherwise, if you're in those low RPMs going around, tootling around the city, yeah, you're kind of just not using that power. So you're only making like 40 horsepower and 40 foot-pounds of torque. Whereas in those low RPMs, I'm only making 30, 40 horsepower, maybe, but I'm making 110 foot-pounds, 100 foot-pounds of torque, so I just feel it all the time. I think in the end, we need a lot more understanding between the two biker groups, the cruiser riders and the sport bike riders. We need a lot more understanding of, like, the bikes that we each ride, right? So, like, yes, this bike right here is not going to blow the doors off of any, or blow the helmet off of any sport bike guy that I ever come across, right? I know that. He knows that. But where we're going to be different is that I could fuel up my bike, ride 100 miles west or east of here, stop, get food, continue another 100 miles, go to where I'm trying to get to, stop, fuel up, go back that 200 miles home in a single day, or more miles in a single day, whereas he on the sport bike couldn't even fathom trying to do 400 miles in a day. Like, that's just like, oh my god, how in the world could you do that? Like, my ass would be sore after 400 miles, kind of. You gotta understand that these bikes are meant for different things. Cruising may be in the name, but they still can haul ass. Eat ass, haul ass, whatever you need it to do. That's what cruisers can do. And my bike, personally, can be fun just cruising around like I just did today. But it also can be fun going across the country. And it also can be fun throwing it around in twists. I don't necessarily think that sport bikes can do that, you know. They are definitely a bike that is meant to be a purpose-built track weapon and go fast, rip around corners, and they're not necessarily the most comfortable machines on the planet. They don't have a whole lot of range. So we got to come to an understanding that, like, cruisers are more multi-purpose than you think they are. I think that's where I'm trying to get to. And especially Harleys. Harleys are very multi-purpose. You can make a Harley into whatever you really want it to be. I think in the end we need to realize that, like, Harleys are far more multi-purpose than just the geezer glide that's meant to go just to the bar and back. And guys like me that are the young somethings, you know, the 20s and 30s, that are buying Harleys are actually using them to have fun on them. We're riding them out to the rallies, not trailering them. We're finding the canyons and the curvy mountain roads and wanting to hang with the sport bikes by trying to drag our boards on the ground, you know? So let's come to an understanding that the myths and the preconceived notions that we have about Harley-Davidson motorcycles applies to a different age group of men, and, well, yeah, mostly men, that don't really use these bikes to their full potential. And the myths that we have surrounding them, that they're slow, that they're unreliable, and that they are just pieces of junk that are overly priced. We need to just open our horizons a little bit, broaden our scope, and actually get on these bikes and ride them and appreciate them. Off of my soapbox, getting off my rant rage here, trying to get home because it looks like it's gonna rain, it seems. So I appreciate you all coming along with me as I tootled around and talked your ear off about this topic and these myths, these things that just ought to die about Harley-Davidson motorcycles. And I hope to catch you in the next one. Some 93, 95, 98, I don't know what percentage of you are not subscribed to the channel. I'd really, really, really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. Let's do something about it. Just subscribe. You don't have to watch every video. I appreciate it if you do, but you don't have to. Don't feel an obligation. It doesn't cost you anything. It's free real estate. What are you doing? Anyways, appreciate you all. Come back for another video here in the future. I'll see you then. Bye.